Bills Mafia. Tonight on the Air Raid Hour, we are setting the Buffalo Bills draft board at defensive tackle. We have over 20 prospects to get to tonight. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Do they fit the Bills? And when can we expect to see them come off the board on draft day? We've got all that and more coming your way. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis, joined as always by my co-host, Dave Tilton. We are brought to you by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. You can find them online at picassospizza.net. Dave, we got a lot to get to tonight. I know we're going to be breaking down interior defensive line prospects. We are excited about that. But before we do, a couple of news and notes. The Buffalo Bills have added a punter since we last spoke, signing some competition for Jake Camarda. They've had a couple of top 30 visits announced, names like Isaiah Bond, and Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott spoke at the NFL owners meetings. The reason why I didn't share our handles like I typically do is because you can check out our X pages for our full thoughts on a wide range of the topics mentioned and some of the news that has broken this week. You can follow me at The Bills Guys and you at Tilt Money. I want to just focus on one comment from Brandon Beane in particular from his press availability yesterday. And he says, I like the ammo we have, being the 10 draft picks the Buffalo Bills have. We are going to play the board and try to move up and try to move back. So not giving away too much, but he is giving away that what we all figured, the Buffalo Bills are probably going to be one of the more active teams on draft day.
Yeah, no surprise, right? Last year was kind of the year of trade backs for Brandon Beane. And although they were minor trade backs in the grand scheme of things, like the impact, we'll see, right? There was a lot of controversy around the trade with the Chiefs and then picking Xavier Worthy. And then obviously 2 years in a row prior to that, the Bills trading up slightly in the first round to get guys like Dalton Kincaid, Kaiir Elam. Obviously, that's well documented. So one thing we know for sure is that they're likely not to stand pat. 10 picks certainly seems like more than I would project the Bills to come out of this draft with. Expect them to be in the 7 to 8 pick range. So while they may move down, and I'm certainly a proponent of potentially moving down to maybe pick up that extra third rounder, which we've coveted and lost, obviously, in that Amari Cooper midseason deal, there is still the ammo, as Brandon Beane mentioned, and as you mentioned, to move up, given we do have the 2 second rounders and a boatload of day 3 picks. So one thing's for sure, it will be interesting and maybe a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Buffalo Bills make a number of moves. I'd like to see a trade up, whether it's if they sit and wait to see who the best player available is at 30, I get it. But I would really like to see them be aggressive and maybe move up from 56 to try to get maybe towards the top 40 picks to get a second player in the top 40. And as you mentioned, I really would like to add them to add another pick in the third round. If you're the Buffalo Bills and you walk out of here with the 30th pick, you trade up in the second round to get a more higher second round pick. You hold pat at 62 and you add a third rounder and you get 4 guys in the top 100. That is something to be super excited about. And if the Buffalo Bills are a little bit aggressive and trade up for a guy here or there, you know that that is the guy they coveted. That is the guy they had a specific role for, unless it's Kaiir Elam, of course. But all the other times you can feel pretty confident that is what the Buffalo Bills trade up for.
Yeah, and there's a number of ways to go about it, right? Because if you're sitting there at 30 and you saw what the Bills did last year, right? They traded down slightly out of the first round and picked up that third round pick. And so if they're sitting there at 30 and there's a bunch of guys they like on the board, maybe they can do something similar again, where they only move down a couple spots, pick up a third rounder, and now all of a sudden you have all that ammo to kind of maneuver around, especially in day 2. So to me, I want them to kind of pick as many guys in the, let's say, top 100 as they possibly can. And obviously you'd like to have a few picks as well on day 3 to kind of fill out the depth in some of the competition. But man, it is nice to know at least that you do have those 2 second-round picks in tow. When we're going to get to interior defensive line tonight, potentially using them on one of those.
Yeah, Bills Our Lecture comes in with a great comment. Sean McDermott told the media today, the Buffalo Bills, with some of the rule changes on kickoffs, they need more special team specific players. So they might want to throw a lot of darts in the 5th round, says Bill Our Electric. A couple of names off the top of my head, and I'm going to start doing some more research. A really good follow, a guy who always seems to have this information at the top of his head, is Ben Fennell, a producer over at CBS Sports. He does a great job every year of breaking down who are some of the best special teamers in the draft. Some of the best special teamers this year that I just off the top of my head, Ricky White, the wide receiver out of UNLV, gives you a lot of versatility. Gunner on special teams, 4-face special teamer. Q Robinson, the edge rusher, kind of that 3-4 outside linebacker, edge rusher tweener out of Alabama. He's got a ton of special teams reps. And Keaton Crawford, the safety out of Nevada, who tested off the charts. He could be this year's Saran Neal. He has like over 1,000 special teams reps over the course of his career at the University of Nevada. So those are just 3 off the top of my head. And you are right. The Buffalo Bills, we should start looking at some of these guys who've got special teams traits or special teams potential based on those comments that Sean McDermott made today. But that's not our focus for this evening. Our focus for this evening is defensive tackles. And today we are going to walk you guys through our projection board, our value board, and we're going to break down over 20 interior defensive line prospects for you. But before we do, a quick word from our sponsor.
What's up, y'all? Khalil Shakir here. When I want Buffalo pizza, it's got to be Picasso's.
Khalil Shakir. Your team, our pizza. Picasso's. This is Buffalo Pizza.
This episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza, with 4 convenient locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Picasso's Pizza has been serving Buffalo's best pizza since 1980. Whether you're local or across the country, you can enjoy their delicious pizza delivered fresh to your door. Visit picassospizza.net to place your order today. Once again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, Dave, let's start this evening before getting into the prospects, breaking down the Buffalo Bills depth chart along the interior of the defensive line. And to be honest with you, it really, I don't even want to say it's that pretty, but it's not that deep. The Buffalo Bills are certainly going to want to add some bodies to this rotation and add some competition heading into training camp. Sean McDermott said during this, Brandon Beane said during his press availability over the last couple of days that they envision Larry Ogunjobi to be used primarily as a 3 technique, helping to spell Ed Oliver at times. Now, of course, on passing downs, you could put Ogunjobi next to Ed Oliver, and he's got that type of versatility. So on early downs, expect the starters to continue to be Ed Oliver, and until something changes, DaQuan Jones across from Ed Oliver, next to Ed Oliver, I should say. Our rotational depth, Larry Ogunjobi and DeWayne Carter, last year's 3rd-round pick. And then we have Zion Logue and Branson Dean as depth. So really, when you look at it, I don't think the question is, will the Bills add players here? I think the question is more, what type of interior defensive lineman are the Buffalo Bills looking for? When making the draft board for tonight, I actively eliminated some players that I really like and I have really liked over the pre-draft process. I eliminated from my draft board tonight Shamar Turner, Ty Robinson, and Riley Mills, because I think they are more traditional 5 techs or those 3-4 defensive end types. I eliminated Aeneas Peebles, Elijah Robinson, and Omar Norman Lott because they are sub 290 pounds. They are very traditional pass rush specialist type of 3 techs, at least right now in their careers. And I just don't see a roster spot available since the Buffalo Bills already have one sub 290 player in Ed Oliver. If we draft any of these guys, I won't be upset because they're really good football players and we can have the conversation about them once they are drafted, unless there's one of these guys that you really want to have a conversation about tonight. But for the sake of today's conversation, I think we're looking more towards 2 types of interior defenders. Number one, I think, is the Bills archetype. Guys who come in between 295 and 310 pounds. They can play both the 3 tech and the 1 tech. They have that versatility. after the starters, Jones and Oliver, the Bills seem to like those guys who have some versatility. The second player that I kept on my board is the traditional nose tackle one tech type. Those guys who are 315 plus pounds. The Bills have pretty consistently avoided them, at least in the drafting process. But there are some hints this offseason, both from the words of Terrell Bernard on the Cover One Film Room and from the Lecky Votu visits, that maybe the Buffalo Bills are looking for maybe more of that plugger type. If I had to make an educated guess, I think the Bills are probably going to favor the Walter Nolans, the Darius Alexanders, the TJ Sanderses of the world. And it'll be up to some of these bigger guys like Kenneth Grant, Tyleek Williams, Alfred Collins to sell themselves to the Bills. Do any of these guys have the goods to sort of make the Buffalo Bills leave their comfort zone? But those are the two types of defensive tackles I think the Buffalo Bills are going to be looking at in this draft.
I mean, I 100% agree. And the reality of the situation is you can talk about Ogunjobi and the suspension or whatever, is the Bills really did next to nothing to address the interior defensive line outside of what they've already had in the building in the free agent period, right? I mean, yes, you signed Larry Ogunjobi, question marks about what role he would play. We got those answers now from Sean McDermott saying he would be in a rotation behind Ed Oliver as the 3 tech. And we once again, as Bills fans, come clamoring to the draft, asking for the Bills and this team to give the people what they want. And that is a plugging, run stuffing type of player that we can put into the middle of that interior defensive line. And as they've done in the past, they've really only had one such guy on their roster really at any point in time. And it's been DaQuan Jones for the past couple years. It was Star before that. And they really hadn't made it a significant investment at all, sort of to the heir apparent, if you will, or even into a rotation to have another guy like that. And I get it somewhat, right? This is a guy that's only going to probably play early downs, and maybe you don't want to invest a ton in that. But DaQuan Jones, last year of his contract, his play dropped off. You need an heir apparent to him. So I do agree with you on that. They should be looking for a guy like that to fill that mold at 315-pound range. And then, yes, another guy who can potentially play both, 1 tech, 3 tech. Ogunjobi's only here on the 1-year contract. We'll see about the development of DeWayne Carter, because we thought maybe he could be kind of that same type of player who could traverse, both positions. And to me, it makes sense to kind of look for 2 guys like that, right? A plug type of traditional, more like nose tackle, and a bigger sort of versatile 3 tech, 1 tech combo. I'm with you that the undersized, under 290, under 285 type of guy is not really needed at this point in the draft, because they've already kind of made their plans clear with the fact that they have Oliver, DeWayne Carter, and Ogunjobi. So adding another guy like that just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. So we'll see. Again, this is what we want. If the Bills are going to change their philosophy and go more towards these types of players we want, we'll see, right? But it does feel like every year in the draft, we kind of clamor for one of these bigger guys, and they just don't go for that type of guy. So we'll see.
It'll be interesting. I want the Buffalo Bills to double dip at this position. I think you're probably in the same boat, and you probably want the Buffalo Bills to double dip too. But I almost feel like this is probably not a position the Buffalo Bills are going to double dip at, because Brandon Beane has made comments in the past like, I need a guy who's going to have a jersey, right? I need a guy who's going to make this active roster, or this 53-man roster. And I'm fairly confident that they're going to draft a guy sometime in the first 4 rounds who will make this roster and be an immediate contributor to this football team, because quite frankly, they need it, right? DeWayne Carter, you expect some development there. You have Ed Oliver, you have DaQuan Jones, but Larry Ogunjobi is suspended for the first 6 games. So you need this defensive tackle that you draft to be plug and play ready, part of the rotation to start the season. Now, that being said, after 6 games, when Larry Ogunjobi comes back, if you draft 2 guys, right? Because it's nice to have those 5 guys, that second rookie behind DeWayne Carter, behind whatever the first rookie you take. It's nice to have that extra rookie. But then when Larry Ogunjobi comes back, what do? Do you waive that rookie and risk losing him to waivers? Probably not. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, maybe the 6th or the 7th round, if they end up with a 7th round pick via trade, that they take a flyer on another guy. But I would almost expect maybe the second guy to be a UDFA, a street free agent, like a Linval Joseph type, like those type of things for the Buffalo Bills in terms of filling out the depth and the competition for training camp. I wouldn't mind like a first, fourth round double dip. I just don't know if that is how Brandon Beane is wired, given the way he wants to construct this roster.
Yeah, maybe there's a surprise cut in there, right? There's always the chance that they cut
Like DaQuan
Jones post June 1st, right? I mean, and that's a pretty decent savings for them. Not that they need the cap room now, but like it's not a 0% chance, right? I don't expect it to happen, but if two studs that they love fall in their lap and they're like, this could be the future of our interior defensive line along with Ed Oliver, then you never know.
Or cutting a guy like DaQuan Jones week 6 to make room for Larry Ogunjobi. You know, DaQuan Jones clears waivers, whatever it is, or actually he's a vested vet, so he doesn't go through waivers. Like you cut DaQuan Jones, most of his money is guaranteed at that point. Maybe you put DaQuan Jones on the practice squad and say, hey, sit here until we need you, or if we need you, you'll be our break glass in case of emergency guy, because whatever rookie it is that they drafted steps up. So there are avenues for the Buffalo Bills to do both. I'm just not 100%. I'm just not 100% sure where it stands at the moment. And Nikki G says, I did hear DaQuan Jones was considering retirement. I've never heard that, but if he is, guy's 34 in December. Maybe the Buffalo Bills really do add 2 bodies here. I know Brandon Beane was mad 2 drafts ago. He didn't get one. Last year he got one. And he's a guy who isn't afraid to double dip at the position. So maybe this is the position where the Buffalo Bills double dip. All right, let's get into it now. Let's start with our tier 1 interior defensive linemen. These are the names we are expected to hear day 1, day 2 of the draft. Let's start with our first round tier. We've got Mason Graham out of the University of Michigan. The Bills are not going to be able to draft Mason Graham, likely to go in the top 10. My comp for him is Braden Fisk on steroids, and on steroids in a good way. Then you have Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, and Kenneth Grant. All 3 could be off the board by the time the Buffalo Bills pick at 30. All 3 could be potential trade up candidates for the Buffalo Bills. And one of these guys, 2 of these guys, could possibly be sitting on the board for the Buffalo Bills at pick number 30. Let's start with Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, 6'4", 296 pounds. A lot of people want to compare him to Ed Oliver, but this guy has beefed up to 296 pounds. So he's close to 300 pounds. I think the Ed Oliver comp is a little not the greatest in the world. I know a bunch of people, very good people in the draft community, have made that comparison. 32-inch arms, so a little shorter there. No RAS score. He only benched at his pro day 27 reps, and he did position drills, which were, according to Jordan Reed of ESPN, outstanding. Nolan posted 72 stops while only missing 5 tackles in his college career. He also posted 67 pressures and 14 total sacks. He was 11th out of 117 players with 50% of the snaps in true pass sets win percentage as a pass rusher with 19.5%. He was also 3rd out of 132 players in run defense stop percentage at 11.9%. So he gives a little pass rush ability, gives a little rush defense ability. He's explosive off the snap with strong playmaking ability as an interior defender. He uses his power effectively to shed blockers and disrupt plays. He can handle double teams and penetrate into the backfield. He shows great body control, balance, and effort to keep plays alive. He's got 3 down potential due to his ability to pressure the pocket. Some of the areas where he struggles, his hand placement and extension at the point of attack, and he needs to refine his pass rush moves and his first phase approach. You will not find a guy in this draft who plays harder than Walter Nolan. This guy is an absolute dog. There are some character concerns. I have not been able to uncover the specifics of that. That is why a lot of people think that maybe he will be sitting around the board at pick number 30, but he is an instant impact run defender in the National Football League with pass rush upside. All of the negatives that I just mentioned are coachable things, not physical deficiencies. He is my number 1 want in terms of defensive tackles. I don't know if he's your number 1 want, but I'm really big on Walter Nolan. And John Roberts says, how much does he weigh? 296 pounds at 6'4".
Yeah, 296, came in just under 6'4" at the combine. Look, he's near the top of the list for me as well. I think so. PFF has him as their 19th rated overall prospect. So, he's clearly a first round talent. The question, like you said, will be, what are some of those character concerns that are a little bit murky? Like, the team's likely done their due diligence on him. So we'll see if that really impacts him on draft day. Of draft eligible IDL, he had the second best run defense grade of all interior defensive linemen in 2024 for PFF, and he's only 21 years old. So let's keep that in mind too. He's a younger prospect as well. That Ole Miss defense, along with Jared Ivey and Trey Amos and all these other guys we're going to talk about as well later, JJ Pegues as well, we'll talk about later. That Ole Miss defense, Princely. That defense was loaded, and Walter Nolan right at the top of the list for the reasons why that defense was so good. So, yeah, if he's sitting on the board there at 30, or even into the late 20s, the Bills may consider a potential slight move up to get a guy like Walter Nolan.
And all three of these guys that we're about to talk about, I think, are trade up candidates, are guys that if they're on the board at 30, they're 100% squarely in play, like run up to the board. The next guy here is Derek Harmon. I know big fans here at Cover One. Eric Turner's a big fan. Greg Tomsett's a big fan. 6'4", 313 pounds, 34+ inch arms, which is pretty impressive. No RAS for Derek Harmon, but he did run a 4.95 40, and it was a 1.74 10-yard split. So he's under that 1.75 threshold that you like to see for an interior defender. Most pressures by a defensive tackle in college football with 55 last season. He was second in pressure rate by a defensive tackle with 10.7%. He had 5 sacks, 10 tackles for losses. His spider chart, when you look at his physical attributes, his wingspan, his height, his weight, all of the testing numbers that he did put up, the two closest athletic comps to Derek Harmon were Christian Barmore and Leonard Williams. I thought that was really impressive and really intriguing of a thing for Derek Harmon. He's got impressive size, length, arm strength, makes him very difficult to move. He's versatile enough to play multiple positions across the defensive line. He's powerful. He's got a quick punch, helps him control blockers effectively. He disrupts plays by shedding blocks and clogging lanes for runners, and he can generate push as a pass rusher, creating pressure within the unit. Some negatives for Derek Harmon: he struggles with finishing plays despite gaining an initial advantage. He's got some inconsistent footwork and pad level, which leads to missed tackles and stalled rushes. I know missed tackle percentage for Derek Harmon is a concern. He is quite literally, though, Dave, all the buzzwords. He's twitchy, he's active, he's athletic, he's got long arms, he's got heavy hands. He creates so much havoc as a pass rusher with his interior penetration. He needs to work on finishing plays. As I mentioned, he's got an alarming missed tackle rate. He can be a better run defender, but he's still a solid run defender. All things that, again, are super coachable. Derek Harmon is right there with Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant to me as one of the must-haves for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and someone said in the comments, Nolan, Grant, or Harmon, pick one.
You can't go wrong.
Be done. And so, like, Harmon's right there for me. With Grant and with Nolan, I mean, the tier there is a great one. I do think Harmon's a stud. Really watching those film cut-ups that Eric and Anthony did on Derek Harmon really sold me even more on him, and I liked him even before that. 43 hurries per PFF in 2024, led all draft-eligible interior defensive lineman. I know he's a popular player with Bills Mafia right now, showcasing strength at the point of the attack, ability to be disruptive in the run game and the pass game. Third best pass rush grade as well in 2024 of draft eligible interior D line with at least 300 defensive snaps. So he is a complete player. The missed tackle rate, yes, there's some concerns about that, but at 6'4", 313, the size a little bit beefier than a guy like Nolan, and it's right in that range, right? We're kind of where the Bills you would think maybe would like to have the best of both worlds from both a pass rush pop perspective from the interior and the ability to stop the run in Derek Harmon. And so I'm a fan. I'm a big fan.
And then you have Kenneth Grant out of the University of Michigan. And when you talk about beef, this guy is the one that brings the beef. 6'3", 331 pounds at the combine. It was reported that he was playing in the 340s at Michigan last year. 33.5-inch arms. He had a 7.12 RAS, a 1.72 10-yard split, so he meets that threshold there. He had the 9th most defensive stops, 22, and the 8th most pressures, 27, among IDLs in the Big Ten last season. Jim Harbaugh called him when he was at Michigan, God's gift to football, because this guy has alien size and athleticism. powerful and broad-bodied, makes him a force in the A gaps. He's versatile enough to play in both odd and even fronts. Strong hands and length allow him to control blockers and shed effectively. Shows flashes of pass rush potential with a solid bull rush and counter moves. Stout run defender. He can absorb double teams and keep the linebackers clean, which is something I think you like to hear, knowing that you have a guy like Terrell Bernard that you just paid a lot of money to. Some of the negatives on Kenneth Grant: lacks consistent explosiveness and quickness in his first step, can struggle with lateral blocks, needs better hand placement for rush refinement, and needs to maintain an optimal weight to maximize his 3-down impact. You see the vision with Kenneth Grant. He has the ceiling to be the best defensive tackle in this class, ahead of the guy who he played next to at Michigan, Mason Graham, 2 to 3 years down the line, if it all comes together. His ability to anchor and reset the line of scrimmage makes him an asset in run defense from day one. And while he flashes that pass rush ability, he still does need to develop that a little bit more. But with the right coaching and the right conditioning, he can evolve into a dominant interior presence capable of disrupting both the run and the pass game. And that's what every Bills fan has been clamoring for. Go find us our Chris Jones. Go find us our Jeffrey Simmons. This is the guy with the ceiling to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's one of few guys who is rated in the top 10 as both a run defender and pass rush grade from interior defensive line for PFF in 2024. So, there is some work to be done as a pass rusher, but, graded out decently well doing that. I think the one thing you wonder about Kenneth Grant is he is slightly outside of the range or the archetype, I'll say, of what the Bills have gone after right at this position. This would be something a little bit out of the norm for them. Not saying that's something that people don't want, because there's a large contingency that want this type of player, and talk about Tyleik Williams and Alfred Collins a bit later. But like that type of player, the Bills haven't really gone after in the past, especially in the draft. So this would be a little bit out of the norm. And I personally put Grant right below the other two guys, just because I think those other two guys are more complete 3-down players, whereas I do see Grant more as a 2-down player. That's not to say he couldn't be a true 3-down player, but I have him just ranked slightly below those other two guys.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more projection with the Kenneth Grant than there are the other two guys. Nikki G comes in and says, all I'm picturing is Heifer for Rocco's Modern Life while Judge was spitting his attributes. I don't actually, it's been so long since I've seen Rocco's Modern Life. I don't know if that is a compliment or an insult, but thank you.
Heifer, yeah, Heifer was this giant steer, this big fat steer.
So he's thinking about Kenneth Grant.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
I got it now. All right. Wasn't an insult to me. I got it. Nikki G, you're back on my good list. Up next here on our tiers, a man who has a tier all to himself, a guy who could possibly be in play at pick number 30 if you're the Buffalo Bills. A pretty polarizing figure, because I think there's a good number of Bills fans who would not want to see this guy at pick 30. But this is a guy that I personally feel like is probably a top 40, 50 player in this draft. So if the Buffalo Bills want him, it'll probably have to be at pick 30. It'll probably have to be a trade up from 56. And that is Darius Alexander. You look at Darius Alexander out of the University of Toledo, 6'3", 305 pounds, but he's got 34-inch arms, a 9.72 RAS. He had a 1.73 10-yard split. His vert and his broad were absolutely explosive. He was absolutely, by far, the best interior defensive lineman in Mobile. He was the talk of the community there. Older prospect. He's going to be 25 by the start of next season. There are some level of competition concerns given he played in the MAC, but he dominated that league as he should have. 11 sacks and 83 pressures over the last 2 seasons, along with a 90.3 run defense grade. And he had a 58-yard pick 6 this past season as well at 6'3", 305 pounds. Put on some good tape against SEC opponents like Mississippi State. He's explosive. He's got power and length, which allows him to control blockers and disrupt plays. He's versatile enough to play in multiple defensive schemes, including even and odd fronts. He's got strong pass rush potential with a variety of counters and bull rush moves. He's got a quick first step, and hand usage makes him a threat in the interior. And that right there, that line right there really makes me think he's a Bills type of defensive tackle. He can disrupt passing lanes with his length and awareness, batting down throws. Some of the negatives for Darius Alexander: inconsistent pad level leads to struggles maintaining and controlling at the point of attack. Timing on his get off can be erratic, limiting his first step explosiveness, and he needs to refine his hand placement and disengagement skills to maximize his impact. To me right now, he is a very good rotational player. He's got the physical traits to thrive as a disruptive interior lineman. He's got a good blend of power, quickness, and versatility that makes him a valuable asset to the Buffalo Bills defensive line, behind Jones, behind Oliver, part of that rotation. With improved consistency and technique, he can evolve into a starting caliber player because he can stop the run and he can rush the passer. So again, those other three guys are the vision, right? But Darius Alexander wouldn't be a bad consolation prize, especially like if we get a corner at 30 like Trey Amos and then trade up for a Darius Alexander in the top like 50 picks. I think that's not a terrible consolation prize. So Darius Alexander is a pretty good player himself. Checks a lot of boxes for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I was thinking just as you said that, like he's the guy at 56 or maybe even a little earlier if you need to, that you go up and get. Maybe if you've taken a corner at, pick 30. You mentioned the combine performance, 9.2 RAS, obviously tested out really well, had the second most bench reps of all interior defensive linemen at the combine, only behind Jordan Phillips, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Second best PFF defense grade of all interior defensive linemen in the class. That's overall defense grade. Those with at least 400 snaps. Third best run defense grade of it draft eligible players, and the 10th most stops in 2024 as well. So pretty complete player. And I agree with you, as a rotational piece, like could come in, step in right away on the older side, like you said, and that may turn some teams off, which I do think maybe could be to the Bills' advantage if they potentially stay put at 56, and there is a chance he could fall to them at 56, and that would be a pretty nice consolation, as you said.
Taking a look at our graphic here, the next tier, these are second and third round guys. These are guys that maybe the Bills might have to trade up for. Maybe some of these guys fall to them at 56 or 62. Who knows? Some of these guys could even slip into the third round, and the Buffalo Bills could make a trade up into the third round to grab some of these guys. But the four names I have here are Tyleik Williams, TJ Sanders, Alfred Collins, and Joshua Farmer. Again, there were some names I omitted. Shamar Turner would fall into this tier. Omar Norman Lott would probably fall into this tier, but I just have omitted them for now due to just time constraints and fit purposes. So these are the names that we are rolling with this evening. Let's start with Tyleik Williams here. And to me, Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, 6'3", 334 pounds, 32-inch arms. There was no RAS. He was injured actually running his 40 at his pro day, but he appears to be okay. No flashy stats here for Tyleik Williams, but the dude was just rock solid in the middle of a national championship winning defense. He is a strong run defender with explosive initial contact and solid block shedding ability. He's got nimble footwork, lateral movement, allows him to stay gap sound on stretch plays. He's got effective hand usage to deconstruct blocks and locate ball carriers. He possesses the power to walk guards back into the quarterback's lap and has the potential to develop pass rushing skills with the right coaching and role. However, he's got inconsistent pad level limits, which limits his ability to anchor against double teams. He's got shorter arms, which allows blockers to get inside his frame and neutralize his power. And he lacks consistent burst to finish as a pass rusher, making him possibly just a 2-down player, right? So this is a guy in Williams. And again, if the Bills want a 3-down player, Tyleik Williams might not be on their board, but he projects as a stout run defender from day one. His power and hand usage and quickness is going to give him a high floor as a rotational early down player. And with refinement to his pass rushing technique and consistency, he could develop into an every down player. I'm very high on Tyleik. I know not a lot of people have him above like the likes of TJ Sanders. I do, because I think he can develop into a 3-down player. I know you're high on Tyleik as well. I would be ecstatic if the Buffalo Bills added Tyleik Williams.
Yeah, I think I'm higher on him than most of what I've seen, but I think in this group, I think, and in some people in the comments, it seems like Claude as well. Like we like Tyleik. I think Tyleik's a top. I think he's a top 50 player in this draft. I think he certainly would be worth a pick at pick 56 if he's there, and the Bills had gone another direction at pick 30. He was one of only 3 defensive tackles at the combine who had an 80+ overall / draft score, which is the NFL Next Gen Stats combine stats that they introduced this year. He was one of only 3 defensive tackles to have that 80+ score. Archetype wise, he's a little heavier, I guess I would say, than what the Bills have done, in the past, have gone after in the past. And that's, that's similar, I guess, to what we've said a little bit about Kenneth Grant. But I really like Tyleek, and I think that he has the potential to come in and fill a pretty big need for the Bills, and as a run stuffer from day one, and then see what then can develop from there. So again, might not be a 3-down player like you said, but certainly could come in from day one and help you shore up that run defense, 7th best run defense grade of all interior defensive line in the class with at least 300 snaps. So I'm a fan of Tyleek. I'm higher on him than most, and I'd be certainly happy to add him to the mix, even if he is a 2-down run stuffer, because the Bills, the Bills could use that in the room for sure.
And the player's good if they're an Ohio State player, and I'm vouching for them. They're good. But the next guy up on the list here is TJ Sanders out of South Carolina. 6'4", 297 pounds, weighed 305 at his pro day. So got above 300 pounds for his pro day. 33-inch arms. He had an 8.55 RAS without a 40 time. His vert and his broad were explosive. Then he went and ran the 40 at his pro day, had a 4.99 40 with a eye-popping 1.67 10-yard split. That is some explosion right there. This is an explosive player in TJ Sanders, a guy I think is flying under a lot of radars. He had 60 pressures, 10 sacks, and 54 stops in the last 2 seasons in the SEC. He is strong and powerful interior defender with violent hands and a sturdy core. He's quick off the snap with the ability to penetrate gaps and disrupt plays. Effective hand usage allows him to counter blocks and create pass rush chances, shows flexibility and balance to slip through creases and pressures the quarterback, has positional versatility to contribute in both odd and even front schemes. Some of the negatives for TJ Sanders: lacks consistent knee bend and struggles with pad level against stronger blockers, can be overwhelmed by double teams due to average raw upper body power, and his block recognition and run defense consistency still need refinement. When you look at TJ Sanders, he reminds me a lot, honestly, of Larry Ogunjobi, a guy the Buffalo Bills already have on the roster, but a guy who's only on a 1-year deal. Sanders projects as a pass rush specialist early in his career with the potential to develop into a 3-down defensive lineman in a multiple front scheme. His best fit is attacking the B gap from the 3-tech or 4-eye alignment using quickness and active hands to generate interior pressure. If he can improve his pad level and play strength, he has upside to be an every down disruptor. So definitely not the plugger type that I think most fans want, but TJ Sanders really checks a lot of the boxes of what the Buffalo Bills like. But do they want a third? Like, they got Ed Oliver, they got Larry Ogunjobi. Do they want a third of that? Ogunjobi's on a 1-year deal. So it would not shock me if the Buffalo Bills were like, yeah, we'll take TJ Sanders. We'll figure it out with DeWayne Carter and DaQuan Jones at the nose tackle. We got Zion Logue. Maybe we can draft a plugger later on, double dip at the position. We'll make it work. TJ Sanders is too good to pass up. I can see a world where that happens.
I could definitely see a world where that happens. And I think TJ Sanders may be a guy that on draft night on day 2, we're talking about, hey, he went higher than we thought, because teams are just fall in love with that upside, and that production is hard to ignore, right? At that size, right, coming in at just under 300 pounds, 297 at the combine, and at just under 6'4", there's some like options for teams that run different types of defenses, and he could potentially be a fit in multiple teams. So I could see him being very much in demand on draft night. Posted his career best pass rush grade in 2024 and his career best run defense grade in 2024. So he progressed throughout his career. 12th best stop percentage of draft eligible interior defensive linemen with 200 run defense snaps and 5 sacks in back-to-back years from the interior. So I could certainly see the Bills and other teams being like, man, this guy just like pops off the tape to us. And Eric and Anthony have done a lot of film cut-ups on TJ Sanders as well, and are certainly in his corner for that. But the question will be, how do the Bills add a guy like this to the mix when they've already got what appears to be 3 techs in Sanders, at least on the surface, looks like he would lean more towards that type of role than he would be be the backup to DaQuan Jones. So that to me is the question mark with Sanders.
The next guy I think is a really exciting prospect. I don't want to say he's going under the radar, but maybe he's a little underappreciated. And that is Alfred Collins out of the University of Texas. This guy is 6'6", 332 pounds with almost 35-inch arms and 10-inch hands. He's huge. I mean, no RAS, and there was probably a reason for that. I think he worked out at his pro day, but I could not find the pro day numbers for him. He had a 26-inch vert and an 8-foot broad at the 8 broad at the combine, which is not great. Like, this is not an explosive athlete. This is a 2-down player right now, most likely Alfred Collins, and whether the Buffalo Bills are going to vibe with that, I don't know. But to me, Alfred Collins shares athletic and play similarities to Grover Stewart of the Indianapolis Colts. They have nearly identical builds. Stewart is 6'4", 315 with 33.5-inch arms. Collins is 6'6", 320 with 34.75-inch arms, so 35-inch arms. Exceptional size, length, and raw strength. He is a dominant run defender, straight up. He's got elite ability to stack and shed and control blockers at the point of attack. He's versatile enough to line up in multiple spots across the defensive front. He's got strong hand usage, which allows him to disrupt blocking schemes and bat down passes. He is a sturdy anchor against double teams with the ability to hold his ground. Some of the things that are some knocks on Alfred Collins: limited pass rush ability due to his average first step explosiveness and hip tightness, struggles with pad level at times, makes him vulnerable to leverage issues, only one season of high level production despite extensive college experience. Yeah, that has to do with playing with guys like Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat. And he's even got Vernon Broughton, who we're going to talk about later, that was on that defensive line as well. But Collins projects as an early down run stuffing defensive tackle in a gap control scheme with potential to grow into a full-time starter. His ability to clog rushing lanes and control blockers makes him an asset for a team looking to fortify their interior run defense. He may never be a dominant pass rusher. His strength and length give him a high floor as a dependable base package player. To me, he's just an easy double at like pick 62 if he's there. It's a double. Like, you might never get the pass rush potential out of him, but man, he's going to improve your run defense.
Exactly. And it's like, this is where the Bills need to decide what their priority is, right?
Come to Jesus a little bit here.
Yeah. It's like, what is the priority right now for them in this interior defensive line room? And I think we're going to find that out rather quickly by day 2 of the draft, right? On what the Bills' intentions are as far as shoring up this defensive line. Now, the reports were that the Bills did meet with Collins, I think formally at the combine. Yep. 6 batted balls in 2024 was tied for the most of all interior defensive linemen in the class. So yes, some of the pass rush ability is not there, but as a plugger and as a guy who can get his hands up and bat passes down and still affect the passing game in that way, you like to see that. He certainly, as you mentioned, has the length, and that is something the Bills obviously have coveted with guys like Epinesa and Groot on the exterior of the defensive line, and have certainly placed a value on getting the hands up in the passing lanes. So Collins is an interesting one. Again, not a typical archetype type of guy that the Bills would have gone after in the past, but to shore up that run defense, you love the length and you love his ability to affect the passing game, even if it's not rushing the passer with the batted balls. So yeah, I'm a fan of Collins. With the second of their second round picks, that would be pretty cool if they hadn't addressed the defensive line up to that point.
And let's take a moment just to appreciate this draft class. Alfred Collins, great football player. He was the 8th guy on our list here. He might have been even lower if we added in names like Omar Norman Lott and Shamar Turner to this list. So absolutely impressive group. And we still got one more in this tier. And this is a guy who has recently moved into this tier based on some of the tea leaves and some of the pre-draft talk. And that is Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. 6'3", 305 pounds. He was previously in my round 3 to 4 tier. Now he's in the 2 to 3 tier. 35-inch arms, 10+ inch hands, 7.84 RAS. His 1.76 10-yard splits within the margin of error, that 1.75 number you like to see. At his pro day press conference, he said he talks to the Bills and Chiefs daily and is also in regular contact with the Eagles. So the Chiefs and Eagles, that's a pretty good indication. I trust those scouting staffs to find some interior defensive players. If he's talking to them and the Bills, I'm feeling pretty good about this player. The Eagles and Bills both told him they like his 3-tech, 1-tech diversity. They think he can do both. He has a top 30 visit with the Buffalo Bills. Elite length and upper body strength make him a powerful presence inside. Strong hands allow him to control blockers and shed them with force. Shows flashes of pass rush ability with effective hand counters, chops, rips, swims. Possesses a relentless motor and solid chase down ability in pursuit. Now, what are some of the knocks on Joshua Farmer? Lacks first step explosiveness and struggles to beat blockers off the snap. Inconsistent pad level leads to leverage issues, especially against double teams. Tight hips limit his ability to redirect and anchor effectively. To me, Farmer projects as a developmental starter best suited for a gap-controlled defense. His length and power make him a potential asset on early downs, but he needs to improve his leverage and consistency to maximize his impact. If he refines his technique and footwork, he could develop into a reliable interior disruptor with rotational pass rush upside. To me, Joshua Farmer is very Tim Settle-esque, and I actually mean that as a compliment because the Buffalo Bills were in love with the attributes and the skill set that Tim Settle had when they signed him as a free agent. It didn't work out for him here. And then Tim Settle hit the free agent market, and a guy like D'Amico Ryans, who knows a thing or two about defense, was all over Tim Settle. So that body type, that archetype, that play style has a place in this league. A lot of teams are fans of it. I think the Buffalo Bills see a lot of what they wanted Tim Settle to be in Joshua Farmer.
The Bills take a hint and realize that the Eagles and Chiefs are talking to him, and just make sure they get this guy, unless it's a smokescreen. But yeah, I like the size, right? 305, so he's kind of right in that range, like you said, where he could be, could do either, as those teams have discussed with him. Needs to clean up some things. You mentioned, to me, the run defense needs to get cleaned up just a little bit. 15.2% miss tackle rate in 2024 was a little concerning, but for his size, dude's a beast. 5th most bench reps of all the interior D line at the combine, and 6 sacks in 2024 was tied for 6th of all interior defensive linemen in the class. So he's got a little bit of everything you like. I think for me, this is a perfect candidate to where if you were able to add a 3rd round pick, that's right where I would probably take him, right? And so who knows, right? Maybe the Bills take a corner, pick 30, and maybe they, go edge or something else with one of their 2nd rounders, and they add a 3rd rounder somehow. He would be certainly in that range for me, right in that 3rd round. I do think 2nd round's a little early for him. But if for some reason the Bills do find themselves with a 3rd rounder, or for some reason the dude slips into the 4th, you have all those extra picks, or you want to move back into the end of the 3rd at the end of day 2 and he hasn't been picked, that's the ammo to do it and go get this guy.
Yeah, I have this really sneaking suspicion he winds up in the back half of that 2nd round. You have the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Eagles, who are all going to be jockeying maybe towards the back half of the 2nd round. Someone joked in the comment section that Joshua Farmer, Pete Nana comes in and says, Farmer said way too much at that podium. Yeah, he revealed a lot. And if what he was revealing was truthful, and he really does have these 3 teams who have expressed a considerable amount of interest in him, that's the sweet spot for him, right? Because you have the Bills at 56 ahead of the Chiefs and the Eagles, and then things can get a little rowdy from there. Teams trying to maybe trade up for his services ahead of the Buffalo Bills at 56, et cetera. So it could get crazy. But for me, I think that is where he ends up going. I think pick 56, 62, that range for Joshua Farmer. All right, into our next tier here. And this tier could include names like Aeneas Peebles, Ty Robinson. Again, I have chosen to omit them just for fit purposes for today's show. There's a specific type of player, and I think you've all gathered the specific types of players we are looking at this evening, the ones that fit the Bills archetypes and the ones that are maybe the plugger types that the Bills have maybe hinted that they are showing a little bit of an interest in. So the next tier, it says 4th round on the graphic, but these are guys who could easily go 3rd round, 4th round. These are sort of the next tier of guys. I've got CJ West out of Indiana, Jordan Phillips out of Maryland, Vernon Broughton out of Texas, Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon, and JJ Pegues out of Ole Miss. Let's start with my favorite interior defensive lineman in the draft in terms of value. Like the player you're going to get for where you're going to get them. Sneak preview. This is my guy along the defensive line. Every year I like to find my gems. This is my gem this year. CJ West out of Indiana, 6'1", 316 pounds. He does have shorter arms, 31.5 inches, 916 RAS though, with a 1.73 10-yard split. He transferred from Kent State to Indiana this past season, and he immediately helped them become one of the best run defenses in the country and make the college football playoff. That wasn't a coincidence. CJ West had a huge part in that change for that Indiana program. He blew up the Shrine Bowl practices. He looked like a guy that belonged in Mobile, not Frisco. He had an 88.1 run defense grade in 2024 with 20 to go along with 25 pressures. He's capable of playing the 1-tech or the 3-tech. He's got quick and twitchy burst, which allows him to shoot gaps effectively. He's compact, got a low center of gravity, helps him play under blockers' pads. He's strong. Punch power allows him to displace interior offensive linemen. He's got active hands and footwork, which keep him moving and engaged in tight spaces. And he's got a high motor and lateral mobility to be disruptive on stretch plays. Some of the weaknesses, obviously, he lacks length, which limits his ability to shed blocks and counter as a pass rusher. And right now, he's not a reliable 3-down player just because he still is developing as a pass rushing threat due to his limited arm length and things of that nature. But he projects as a rotational contributor to an NFL defensive front who's going to instantly improve your run defense. He is sturdy and spatially aware defender with great hands who excels against the run. Plus, he's got elite testing numbers. Like, let's not complicate things here. This is a stout run defender who is a freak athlete. He is a plug and play to me, 1-tech whose length could maybe hinder his ability to develop as a pass rusher, but you know what you're getting. You're getting at least 2 good downs out of this guy. Maybe with that athletic ceiling, despite the length, you could get that 3rd down out of him. CJ West to me just would be such a solid double in if we can trade up into the 3rd round or get him in the 4th round.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of CJ West as well, and I'm glad that he is going to make it likely to our maybe into your no matter what list. It sounds like down the road, 8th best run defense grade of all interior defensive linemen in the class with 400 snaps, 4th highest stop percentage of all interior defensive linemen in the class with 150 run defense snaps. Had him in my notes as one of my favorite prospects in this draft. And so it sounds like we're in alignment there. Really, some of the advanced metrics and analytics favor CJ West. He tested well, obviously, as you mentioned, over a 9.0 RAS. And it's one of those where you kind of get into this tough debate with yourself where you're like, man, the Bills, do they really have to take a defensive lineman super early? And CJ West is sitting there in the 3rd or 4th round. And you're like, yeah, they probably do. But then, like, if he's still there in the 4th round and you've already taken a guy, like, do you double dip with a guy like CJ West if you've already taken, like, say, a guy in the 1st round? Like, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, in my opinion, to do something like that. So, like, let's say you get a guy like TJ Sanders and CJ West, those 2 types of guys paired up with each other, like in this draft. Like, to me, that is an awesome outcome. So, yeah, big fan of CJ West.
Next up is another guy I'm a big fan of, and I know a lot of people in Bills Mafia are fans of him just because of his name. And that is Jordan Phillips out of the University of Maryland, 6'1", 312 pounds. He's got 31.5-inch arms, which is a little below the Buffalo Bills archetype, 6.68 RAS. He did not run a 40, so don't really have a 10-yard split to really measure his explosiveness. But he is another guy who popped at the Shrine Bowl. He's only 20 years old. He was a high school power lifter and wrestler. He made his way onto Bruce Feldman's freak list. He's got Bills type of DNA. He was talking with guys like Brett Coleman and EJ Snyder at the Shrine Bowl. He did interviews and he talked about how, like, football is his life. He watches film for fun. He talked about all the guys he models his game after, including Keanu Benton. So he's just got that Bills DNA. Like, he just seems wired like a guy that the Buffalo Bills would be sort of drawn to. 26 pressures and 31 run stops while only missing 3% of his tackles over the last 2 seasons, 10.5% pass rush win rate this past season. He's explosive, powerful, natural leverage, which makes him difficult to move at the point of attack. He's got strong hand usage, aided by his wrestling background, which helps him control blockers. Got a quick first step and surprising lateral mobility for a dense interior defender. He's got excellent anchor ability against solo and double teams, protecting second-level defenders. Again, Terrell Bernard's best friend, right? High work ethic and leadership qualities make him a valuable locker room presence. Some of the negatives: limited pass rush upside, relying mostly on power without consistent counters, struggles with block deconstruction due to his shorter arms and inconsistent hand placement, and he can get too far over his pads, limiting his ability to two-gap effectively. But this is a young player, 20 years old, which I think is the huge downside for the Buffalo Bills, especially if you're looking for an instant impact contributor. Right now, to me, he's a rotational run defender, Pass rush potential is there, though. Will continue to develop his hand uses and pass rush technique. He could become a reliable interior presence in both gap control and penetration-based schemes. So to me, high ceiling player with Jordan Phillips. You just, I think, worry how much he can contribute right away at the young age of 20.
And it's such a weird dilemma to be in if you're a Bills fan, right? Because, or organizationally, right? Because in most cases, like, you'd want the young player, right, with the high ceiling, and you'd want a guy that potentially gives you that Pro Bowl type talent like down the road. But the Bills are also kind of in a position where they need a guy now to come in, and like maybe they can get the best out of both worlds with a guy like Jordan Phillips, who can, if they feel comfortable, can come in and play some on day one. Strength, like you said, is not going to be the problem with him, and it's coaching and technique and things of that nature that are going to be what kind of unlocks the most potential you can get out of a guy like Jordan Phillips. But, you know, size-wise, archetype-wise, he kind of lines up right with a guy like DaQuan Jones, right? He's 6'2", 312, 315, and I mean, that's kind of right where DaQuan Jones is landing size-wise as well. So I would certainly be open to considering him. He's one of my favorite guys in this group, but also the Bills have to feel confident that he can come in and play day one, I think. Yeah,
I think if I was Jordan Phillips' agent, I probably would have told him to hit the transfer portal and like go to Alabama or something, like go to Texas, spend a year in like the SEC. And I think because again, if he would have done that, I think, and he could have developed his game even further and gone to maybe a bigger platform than Maryland, I think this is a guy we could be talking about as a potential like first, second round pick, right? And this is a guy maybe we're getting the third and the fourth round. So an immense bargain here for Jordan Phillips, but how long will it take for that to click? That is the question. Next up here is Vernon Broughton out of the University of Texas. This is a guy who's really flying under the radar, in my opinion. 6'5", 311 pounds, 35-inch arms. He has been overshadowed by other people in that room, right? Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy before this season. Alfred Collins next to him this season. But I mean, he's got a quick first step, allows him to penetrate gaps effectively. Excellent length, helps him extend press and bypass blockers. Shows good versatility with the ability to play both odd and even fronts. Uses his active hands and varied pass rush moves to create interior pressure. Athletic enough to cover ground as a run defender and disrupt plays laterally. Some of the weaknesses in Broughton's game: he lacks lower body strength and balance, making it hard to maintain control in attack mode. Needs to improve block recognition and shedding technique for better run defense. Pass rush can lose effectiveness deeper into his reps, struggling to finish plays. He's an early career rotational piece. I think he fits the Bills type, especially at that size. He can 3-tech, he can 1-tech. He's a high upside as a run defender and a pass rusher. Whether he'll be able to be like an instant impact contributor like some of the other guys ahead of him, probably not. But this is a guy who can develop into a really, really, really solid rotational piece, and even a guy who can start for you down the road. Can't say enough good things about Vernon Broughton. This is such a loaded class.
Yeah, he's certainly under the radar. 7th most hurries of all interior defensive linemen in the class. Only Aeneas Peebles and Derek Harmon had higher pass rush grades than Broughton in 2024 for those with at least 400 snaps. So he is certainly flying under the radar, playing next to a guy like Alfred Collins, obviously. To me, Broughton is a guy that maybe as a fit is a better fit than a guy like Collins, at least for what the Bills maybe want to do. And so for me, like, he would be squarely on my radar, and, you know, that was one of those 4th round picks that the Bills have, depending on sort of how the rest of the draft had played out. But yeah, I'm a fan of Broughton. I think that he, you know, I'm trying to find more reasons why he's not higher on draft boards than he is right now. And I'm struggling really to find like, you know,
no Senior Bowl, no Shrine Bowl. I think it was just the fact that he kind of just showed up at the combine. So the fact that like he just was a combine only guy was kind of overshadowed by Alfred Collins. I think a lot of that plays into it.
Yeah, but still a fan, and yeah, would certainly be happy with him.
He can go off the board. He can go off the board in the 2nd or 3rd round too. Like, I mean, we have no idea what's going through the minds of some of these NFL GMs. So like in the draft community, I see a ton of guys who say like, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a day 2 player. So very good player in Vernon Broughton. The next guy up is a guy who has a lot of fans in Bills Mafia and the NFL draft community. And that is Jamari Caldwell out of the University of Oregon. 6'2", 332 pounds, 32-inch arms, a 4.13 RAS, poor explosion testing, a 1.86 10-yard split, not great. This is definitely a plugger type of testing, but he does show more than that on tape. The BJ Raji comps are real. You really don't see guys his size move the way he does. James Foster, who's one of my favorite follows on social media, one of my favorite follows in the draft community, says that Jamari Caldwell is one of his favorite film follows and says this of Jamari Caldwell: you don't see very many 340 pounders who can A, hold the point in the A gap, B, split double teams, C, win with power, D, win with speed, and E, chase screens, stretch runs to the sideline. So a very, very intriguing player in Jamari Caldwell who flashes some very high potential. He's a prototypical nose tackle build with low center of gravity for leverage, strong anchor and ability to absorb double teams and free up linebackers, shows surprising quickness and lateral mobility for his size. Active hands help him disengage from blocks and maintain gap integrity. Plays with high effort and physicality, consistently straining through the whistle. Some of the knocks on Jamari Caldwell: lacks ideal length, making it harder to stack and shed against longer blockers, struggles to generate consistent interior pressure on passing downs, and he gets knocked off balance when playing too upright or failing to maintain control. Caldwell projects as a rotational nose tackle best suited for early downs and short yardage situations. His ability to clog running lanes and absorb blockers makes him a valuable asset in a base defense, but his impact on passing downs is likely limited. If he refines his technique and conditioning, he could develop into a reliable starting two-gapper in the right system. So again, are the Bills willing to invest in a guy who might only be a two-down player as you maybe get into the fourth round? And if a guy like Jamari Caldwell is still there, maybe the investment in a two-down player is more worth it for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where a lot of people are like, give me both of these defensive tackles from Oregon, because then you get the best of both worlds. Only one of 3 draft eligible interior defensive linemen with at least 4 batted balls and 22 hurries, and graded out really well as a run defender, 81.6 grade in 2024. So that puts him in the top 30. I think that there's a lot to like about Caldwell. I think that, again, he's one of those guys, if you decide that you're looking at the board early in the draft, and if you're the Bills and you're like, hey, you know what? We're not gonna spend an early round pick on a two-down player, right? We're gonna go for the swing on a guy like Walter Nolan or TJ Sanders or Derek Harmon, and then later on we're gonna go for sort of that guy that plays the two downs in a guy like Caldwell. Then that, to me, is a candidate for the second of a double dip, in my opinion. So I like Caldwell. There's some things that are a little bit concerning. The athletic testing wasn't great, but he still looks like he could project as a pretty solid run defender from day one.
Next up is JJ Pegways out of Ole Miss, 6'2", 309 pounds, 32.5-inch arms. He had a 4.59 RAS, poor explosion testing, a 1.82 10-yard split. But Jordan Reed of ESPN, I really respect his opinion, commented that he looked great at his pro day, and I could not find official numbers from his pro day. So Jordan Reed said he looked good at his pro day. So assume that some of those numbers and some of that RAS score went up with his testing there. He is notable for starting his career as a tight end and being used this past season at Ole Miss as a short yardage running back. He had 7 rushing touchdowns in 2024. He also did fullback drills at the combine, but as a defensive tackle, he finished top 10 in pressures amongst Power 4 interior defensive linemen this past season on that loaded Ole Miss defense. His 2024 stats on defense: 42 tackles, 12 for loss, 3.5 sacks, 1 pass deflected, and 1 fumble recovered. And then on offense, he chipped in 21 carries for 69 yards, nice, and 7 touchdowns. So just a really, really intriguing player from that standpoint. He is a versatile defensive lineman with the ability to play multiple positions, exceptional quickness and change of direction ability for his size. Strong hands and feet allow him to win early pass rush situations. He can shoot the gaps effectively and create disruption in the backfield. He has experience as a short yardage runner, showcasing his athleticism and power. Some of the knocks on his game: he struggles with pad level and can be driven back when playing too tall. Inconsistent technique and block shedding leaves him vulnerable against stronger linemen. May be limited to rotational role due to endurance concerns and developmental needs. And he lacks his lack of length suggests that he'll have a hard time developing into more of a traditional run defender. So Pegway's here projects as a rotational defensive lineman best suited for a penetrating front where his quickness and athleticism can be maximized. His ability to create disruption in passing situations makes him an intriguing option as a situational rusher, although he must refine his technique against the run to earn a full-time role. If he develops properly, he could be a dynamic interior disruptor with occasional versatility in creative defensive schemes. I think the Bills will be very, 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 very intrigued by his pass rushing ability, but I think needing an immediate contributor, they will be very, 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 very concerned about how quickly he can become a run defender.
Yeah, and this is one of those where it's not like Jordan Phillips and you're saying, oh, he's the young like this is a guy that you're probably going to have to coach up a bunch on the technique, move from tight end like you mentioned. What is his contribution going to be on day one? I think if the Bills had, a really pretty dynamic core in front of him, didn't need his services maybe for a year or two where he could learn behind, and not have to contribute from day one, he would be someone who, no doubt that they would be intrigued by him, but I'm not sure that you can pull the trigger on him, especially as your first and only defensive line pick in the draft. But I do like him, and I do think he also has a really great attitude as well. I think he would be a good fit in the locker room. From all the interviews I've read of him, he's certainly a guy that's willing to do whatever it takes to help the team win. And I know the Bills would be very intrigued by that as well.
So we've really exited now our tier of guys who would be first round, second round consideration, guys who we could trade up in the third round for, guys who are like fourth round options. So this next tier of players is really guys like maybe fourth round, but more likely some of our fifth and sixth round picks. If the Buffalo Bills are looking to double dip at the position, these are some of the names that maybe the Buffalo Bills would consider: Tim Smith out of Alabama, Zeke Biggers, Georgia Tech, Deion Walker out of Kentucky, Cam Jackson, Florida, Eric Gregory, Arkansas, Nash Hutmacher out of Nebraska, Nazir Stackhouse out of Georgia, Jay Toya out of UCLA, and Thor Griffith out of Louisville. So a ton of names here to get to. We're not going to get to them all. I want to start with Tim Smith out of Alabama because I think he's a guy the Buffalo Bills could really zero in on as, and the other guy we're going to talk about, Zeke Biggers, the Bills are actually connected to. They have a Zoom interview with. This is just me projecting based on looking at the player. This is the guy I think the Buffalo Bills could be pretty drawn to. Tim Smith out of Alabama, 6'4", 302 pounds, 33-inch arms, 10-plus-inch hands, no RAS, so nothing notably freakish about his pro day numbers, but 5 years of high-level competition at Alabama, and he's pretty durable. He started 32 games and played in 65 games in his career there at Alabama. He engages with heavy hands and has good initial power off the point of attack. Quick first step and footwork help him beat reach blocks, displays solid techniques in stacking, controlling blocks as a two-gapper, uses an effective club move to create space in pass rush situations, can hold his ground and clog running lanes with a firm anchor. Some of the knocks on him: lacks dominant take and high-end playmaking ability, struggles with block recognition, especially against down blocks, limited pass rush upside due to below-average foot quickness. Smith projects as a rotational defensive tackle in a run-stopping role, best suited for early downs in a two-gapping scheme. His ability to hold the point of attack and absorb blocks will be valuable in short yardage and base defense situations. However, his limited pass rushing upside likely caps him as a depth piece rather than a full-time starter. But if you go out and you get yourself a TJ Sanders in the second round, and you're sitting there in the back half of the fourth round or the fifth round, and Tim Smith is sitting there, that's a tempting guy to double dip with.
Yeah, I mean, and look, this is a guy that you don't worry about coming in and playing a role on day one, right? You mentioned the experience, 65 games played over the course of his career at a premier program, can come in, play the run right away. That's what you can ask him to do. You don't have to ask him to do more than that. Only a 3.2% missed tackle rate in 2024, which put him top 15 in the class of interior defensive linemen in 2024. So not a concern at all about drafting a guy like Tim Smith and asking him to come in and contribute as a run defender on day one. And I think that is something that should be of interest to the Bills given their need there, and should be of interest as well, depending on a double dip on what they do early in the draft at the interior.
The next guy, maybe he's going to go earlier than sort of the late day 3 I have projected for him. Maybe he sneaks into like the top half of the 4th round. And that's Zeke Biggers out of Georgia Tech, 6'5", 321 pounds, 35-inch arms, 10+ inch hands, 9.8 RAS score, a 174 10-yard split, elite explosion grade. He has a Zoom interview with the Bills. And my goodness, yes, do your homework on this guy. He checks a lot of these physically dominant boxes. He's got elite length and wingspan, giving him a large tackle radius and block disruption potential. Shows flashes of strong punch power to reset the line of scrimmage. He's hard to move when he plays with proper pad level and leverage. He has some special teams value with 4 career blocked kicks, and he can be a gap control defender with the right development in technique and strength. Some of the downsides to Zeke Biggers, who on paper just looks perfect, right? Slow off the snap and struggles to initiate first contact, lacks pass rush ability and burst, making him a non-factor on passing downs, struggles with pad level, and lets blockers get into his chest too often. Biggers projects as a developmental defensive lineman with the potential as an early down run defender in a gap control scheme. His elite length and strength flashes make an intriguing long-term prospect, but he will need significant technical refinement to maximize his potential. At best, he can be a rotational depth piece with occasional special teams value, but his lack of pass rush impact limits his upside. So again, 9.8 RAS. Maybe you think your coaches can do something that his college coaches could not, but I think you at least are probably getting a pretty nice foundational 2-down piece in a guy like Zeke Biggers.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an interesting debate, right? Do you take the athletic upside with a guy like Biggers, or do you take a guy with a little bit or a lot more experience at a more premier program in Tim Smith, right? And it's going to be tough to ignore the athleticism of Biggers, right? But some things are concerning. Pretty high missed tackle percentage, 25+%. Like you mentioned, no real upside as a pass rusher, but comes in, has the length, the wingspan for a defensive tackle, insane, or over 85 inches, just ridiculous length and athletic ability. So that's one of those where the Bills haven't shied away from length and athletic ability, in the past on the defensive line. But at the same time, it's like, okay, this is all going to depend on sort of what you've done already in the draft. I don't think Biggers is a guy that you take as the first defensive lineman that you pick in the draft, and hopefully it wouldn't be the case that they do that, but there are certainly worse upside swings you can take than a guy with this type of athletic ability. So wouldn't be mad about it. But for me, I would be like kind of where we have him tiered here, like more in that sort of middle day 3, towards maybe the latter half of day 3.
The next guy, my number 17th right now rated defensive tackle. What a fall from grace from a guy who was being talked about possibly at pick 30 in January, like on our Senior Bowl preview shows. And that's Deon Walker out of Kentucky, 6'7", 331 pounds, 34-inch arms, almost 11+ inch hands. Just a specimen. But 3.63 RAS score with a 1.9 10-yard split. That's terrible. He had a really poor explosion grade. Some of that could possibly be explained by the fact that apparently he played in 2024 with a broken back, right? So that's A, concerning, but B, also maybe if he's recovered from that, maybe he's a better player than maybe he's being projected. Bills fans are going to love or hate me for saying this. Like, he is, to me, looks a lot like our Jordan Phillips, not the Jordan Phillips in this draft, but our Jordan Phillips. An athletic specimen with leverage issues. He had 97 pressures, 15 sacks, and 70 stops in 3 years, playing everywhere along that Kentucky defensive line, from nose tackle all the way out to edge rusher. He's got massive size and elite length, which make him difficult to move in the trenches. He flashes surprising lateral quickness and hand usage to disengage from blocks. He can set a firm edge and create push in the pocket when playing aggressively. He's an effective as a run defender with the ability to clog gaps and control blockers. And he's got potential to develop into a disruptive interior presence with improved conditioning and technique. However, he plays too high a lot, limiting his leverage and anchor against blockers, struggles with pad level, balance, and flexibility, making him easier to neutralize. And he's got inconsistent motor and conditioning, which leads to stretches of ineffective play. Walker projects best as an early down run defender on a multiple front scheme, primarily as an 8-gap player. His size and strength give him potential to be a gap controlling presence, but his lack of pass rush consistency limits him and his every down value. With improved conditioning and technical refinement, he can develop into a key rotational piece on a defensive line. Maybe more than that if it all clicks. Maybe the broken back was the reason for it. I don't know, but kind of a scary prospect here in Deon Walker. Very boomer bust.
Yeah, and I think given the depth of this class, like it wouldn't surprise me one way or another if someone took a chance on him or if he fell down. And as Pete says, Walker played 5 tech and wider 50% of the time. So maybe he does project more as sort of a 3-4 end in that scenario. Based on his size, that kind of would make sense to me, I would imagine. But what you read off right there does sound a lot like our former Jordan Phillips. And I don't know if Bills fans want to go back to that well again, especially when there's other guys out there in this class that I think could come in and probably fill the need. And not necessarily saying that like there's some huge upside here with Walker. There is upside, but I'm thinking for me at that point, the risk is probably not worth it. Unless it's sort of like down there in the middle of day 3 somewhere and you've already kind of address the position elsewhere.
Number 18 on my list here, Cam Jackson out of Florida, 6'6", 328 pounds, 34-inch arms, 4.56 RAS score, a 1.8 10-yard split, poor explosion grades. This is another one of these sort of nose tackle types where if the Bills did take one, probably the back half of a double dip. He had a nice Senior Bowl week. He was a pretty popular guy at the Combine. He had multiple reported meetings, none of them, from what I could tell, with the Buffalo Bills. Elite length and wingspan makes him a difficult obstacle for blockers. Exceptional natural strength allows him to control and overwhelm single blocks. Powerful hands can jolt offensive linemen and help reset gaps. Can be an asset in clogging run lanes and holding the point of attack. Potential value on special teams, particularly in field goal blocking situations. He has at least one that I noted in his career. Plays too tall at times, making him vulnerable to being moved off his spot. Offers very little pass rush ability and is unlikely to contribute on passing downs. Struggles with balance and maintaining a strong base, leading to inconsistency. Jackson projects to me as a developmental nose tackle in a run-focused role. His length and strength give him potential as an early down gap controller, but his lack of pass rush ability limits his every down value. Initially, he will likely serve as a rotational interior defender while refining his technique and contributing on special teams. So to me, Cam Jackson is just like a dart at a two-down plugger. I don't expect the Buffalo Bills to have much interest in him, but he does fit the mold very similarly to some of these other guys in this range.
Yeah, not too much else to add on him. He kind of blends in to me a little bit with the rest of this sort of tier. Nothing that stands out particularly for me, but nothing that's like a huge red flag. I think he would just be like just a guy for me that could fill a need. Wouldn't be someone that on draft day, if the Bills called his name, I'd be like, oh, I'm upset with that, but certainly wouldn't be overly excited. I guess I would say is very much a middling type of prospect for me.
The next guy is Eric Gregory out of Arkansas. And this is a guy I think maybe the Buffalo Bills, they've done a lot of homework on Landon Jackson. And they sent Marcus West to the Arkansas Pro Day. You know the Bills have been watching a bunch of Arkansas tape for Landon Jackson. So you know that they've probably seen a decent chunk of Eric Gregory, the defensive tackle out of Arkansas, 6'4", 319 pounds, 33-inch arms. He had a 6.44 RAS with a 1.76 10-yard split. So again, within that margin of error of that 1.75 number you'd like to see. He's played 61 career games over 6 seasons. So he's an older prospect. 44 starts, 135 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, and 9.5 sacks. He's got a strong lower body and a good pad level, giving him leverage at the point of attack. Holds up well against double teams with solid anchor ability, uses upper body power and hand strength to shed blocks effectively, generates push with his leg drive, collapsing gaps and disrupting blocking schemes. Here's the key thing here. He can play both defensive tackle spots, adding versatility to a defensive front. So he can play 1 tech, he can play 3 tech. Some of the knocks on him: lacks quickness off the snap, limiting his range and playmaking ability. Below average lateral movement prevents him from making plays outside his immediate area. Limited pass rushing skill set, making him a non-factor on passing downs. Gregory projects as a depth piece in a rotational defensive line unit, best suited for early downs in a 2-gapping scheme. His ability to absorb blocks and hold a line makes him valuable in run-stopping situations, but his lack of pass rush upside limits his every down potential. He will likely carve out a role as a backup interior lineman who can provide reliable trench play when called upon. So he's a guy who can maybe come in and compete with a Zion Logue and maybe be a guy who's on the practice squad, who gets called up when needed. Like, he seems like a guy who could probably play in the National Football League in a pinch or be the very back half of a rotation, but he's definitely not a guy you're drafting for his upside.
No, you're not drafting for his upside, but you're drafting for a pretty, I think, decent floor. A reliable guy who's going to come in. He's going to be coachable. He's got a ton of experience. I like sort of the archetype as far as the size is concerned. 6'3", 319, has the 81 inch wingspan, top 20 run defense grade for PFF of all IDL in the class with 400 snaps. So he, has a few things sort of metrics wise working in his favor when compared to the rest of this class. But yeah, I think a really like solid floor guy to me, Gregory. And like you said, the Bills likely had one eye on him as well as they were kind of doing their homework on Landon Jackson. So wouldn't surprise me in the least. Let's say if the Bills miss out on a guy like Landon Jackson, if a guy like Eric Gregory winds up in their lap somewhere in the late day 3, as someone who can come and be a floor type of player, depth player, and potentially maybe not make the team, but be a practice squad type player.
Last guy on my list here, number 20, Nash Hutmacher out of Nebraska, 6'4", 319 pounds with 33-inch arms. Could not get a hold of his pro day numbers, and he was one of the big combine snubs after a big Shrine Week. He is a 4-time state champion in wrestling in high school and was the number 1 wrestling recruit in the country. He wrestled at Nebraska actively while playing football. He's strong and well-balanced space eater who can anchor against blocks. He uses solid upper body power and hand strength to engage and control offensive linemen, plays with good PAV level, maintaining leverage at the point of attack, can push the pocket vertically with his dense frame and functional strength, high motor for a big man, consistently pursuing plays until the whistle. Some of the knocks on him: below average lateral quickness and change of direction limit his range, lacks an effective pass rush arsenal, making him a non-factor on passing downs, and just an ordinary initial burst and snap anticipation prevent him from gaining an early advantage. Hutmacher projects as a rotational nose tackle or interior defensive lineman in the 3-4 or 4-3 scheme, best suited for early down run stopping duties. His ability to absorb blocks and clog space make him a valuable depth piece, but his limited mobility and pass rush skills cap his ceiling. He'll likely serve as a 2-down player, contributing primarily in short yardage and goal line situations. Kind of reminds me of Justin Zimmer. I don't know. Maybe it's the fact they're both like, those like Midwestern big old white boys, but I get some Justin Zimmer vibes from Nash Hutmacher here towards the end of the draft. And I know there's probably going to be some fans of his in some scouting rooms, at least from the coaching standpoint.
Yeah, I like the Justin Zimmer comparison. He did have 4.5 sacks in 2023, another 2 last year. So like the analytics don't necessarily say that he's great from the pass rush standpoint, but he's gotten his way to the quarterback a few times in the last couple seasons. And at 6'4", 310, he's kind of right in that realm where the Bills would be looking as far as archetype wise. So another guy who I think could come in and be like a decent floor option for the Bills later on in the draft.
All right. So that should just about do it for us this evening. Again, there are some guys that we omitted we just did not have a lot of time to do as much research as we wanted to. So guys like Shamar Turner, Ty Robinson, Riley Mills, we didn't get to because they're kind of like the 5-tech type. Omar Norman Lott, Aeneas Peebles, Elijah Roberts, Tonka Hemingway, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, Peyton Page. I didn't really have them on my list due to size. Some other guys that I just didn't have a chance to get to before tonight: Nazir Stackhouse, who's like a Zion Logue type from the University of Georgia, Jay Toya, Thor Griffith, who I already talked about when we talked about the Shrine Bowl and some of those guys, Cam Horsley out of Boston College, Ty Hamilton out of Ohio State. So there are some other guys, Yaya Black out of Iowa. There are other players. This is a deep, deep class, and the Buffalo Bills could have some options as UDFAs as well. Is there anyone we haven't talked about tonight, Dave, that you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, I mean, a couple of those guys you mentioned, like, I like the players, right? And I just wonder if they're even going to be on the Bills board. Peebles comes to mind initially, right? 282. I like the player, but again, not someone I would particularly go after if I was the Bills. I mean, Shamar Turner, you mentioned, he has a lot of people that like him, but there's maybe some character concerns with a guy like Turner, and teams are going to have to do some diligence on him. I think that was one of the red flags on him, but I believe a really good and high-end prospect that maybe the Bills won't even have on their board. So yeah, a lot of guys. We went through in depth, 20 plus tonight, and there's probably another 10, 15 more we could have done. But yeah, we'll we'll probably have some notes on all of these guys come the actual draft.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to be doing the same exact thing next week, but we're going to be doing it for edge rushers. So we thought we had a lot of players to get through this week. We're going to have a lot to get through next week because it's a pretty loaded defensive line class. If you're looking to help us out, there are 3 ways in which you can really help us out here at the Air Raid Hour. Number 1, the easiest, just smash that like button. Really helps us with the algorithm. Number 2 is clicking that share button and sharing on social media or sharing just with friends, family members, anyone you think would enjoy the Air Raid Hour. And then the final thing you can do is once this show is done being live and it's available for replay on demand, going there and leaving a comment. Maybe it's a prospect you disagree with our takes on and you want to leave a comment about that. Maybe it's a favorite player you want to share at the IDL position group. Maybe it's a guy we missed that you want to talk about. Anything you want, really. A go Bills, a cheers. If you leave us a comment in the comment section, it helps drive the algorithm, helps get us in front of some more eyeballs. So we really appreciate that as well. I know Pops Mafia says, when is the Matter What show? I know we're a little tight on the shows here because we got to do edge rushers and we got to do wide receivers. So we might have to do some on-demand shows this year, some replay shows, some Thursday night shows as well, in order to fit all this in before we get to the draft and our draft coverage. So we're definitely going to cover edge rushers. We're definitely going to cover wide receivers. We're definitely going to do our No Matter What show. And then hopefully we can maybe squeeze in a couple of day 1 shows, day 2 show. But definitely have to do a little bit more forward thinking before we get to that. But you can expect edge rushers, you can expect wide receivers, and you can expect No Matter What from us before we get to our live draft coverage. Dave, any final thoughts here before we head out?
No, we'll squeeze in as much as we can with these shows over the next couple weeks. We're going to be in April tomorrow, folks. So the countdown is officially on. We're only going to be about little over 4 weeks away now. 4 weeks from Thursday, right? This Thursday, I believe, is the draft. So, yeah, it's coming up quick.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate all of you. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!